Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Janson X 928 wash processed Panama from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Manhattan, based out of Rotterdam, Netherlands. And true to our word, we have now reviewed every single Janson coffee that Manhattan has released since their original Janson release. And that's not too surprising given our love for both Manhattan as well as washed Panamanian Geishas. So we're looking forward to discussing the latest in Manhattan's Janson series, as this right here is day 33. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard Manhattan recipe, which is a 16:1 water to coffee ratio brewed at 208 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the Chemex, which indicates a more medium grind. Roast profile for Manhattan, it's not necessarily the lightest coffee roaster out there, but a lot of people would consider this very light by most standards. So we'll definitely say on the lighter side of European coffee roasters. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 9, first impression. And yeah, we do start Manhattan's coffees a little earlier than most coffee roasters, but this one right here had a slight bit more sweetness and vibrancy off the first impression than typically experienced with a lot of the other Janson coffees that we had reviewed from Manhattan. A slightly grain-like cereal quality right from the start, with complementary florals being the most dominant aspect from this very first start. So it was very clean and a little bit more structured than initially expected, so it was off to a better start. I honestly felt that this was the one that had the most potential from the Jansons that we had reviewed based off of that first day, so it's going to be interesting to see if it continued along those lines. Day 12 ran it through the Chemex, and there was a little bit of the herbality in the initial cup, but it goes away, and in its place you get this slightly light colored sugar hard candy. The cup does cool down to an almost candied florality, and there's still plenty of citrus and clarity within the cup, so it continues to feel really well structured. And I would say that that's the best thing I'd experienced from these first couple of days, is this Janson felt a little more structured than we'd experienced from almost all of the other Jansons to this point. Day 15, really happy with the cup in terms of the florality, as it's quite well pronounced, very jasmine forward, and I would say that this one had the most defined floral aspect to it. They do have a jasmine flavor note listed on here. It makes perfect sense given just how well pronounced it is within this cup, especially as it does cool down. It really does have a defined flavor profile and sweetness to the cup, so really enjoyed it up to this point. Day 18, Chemex day, and the cup does feel even more defined through the Chemex, as there is a little bit more brightness through this brew method. And in addition to that, there was a slight bit of that listed grape. Now they do have a green grape listed on here, and I feel like it might be the priming effect, because at no point would I ever say that was an overly abundant flavor note, but it's not one that I pick up very often in most coffees in general. Oftentimes, if I am picking up grape, it is something on the more dark side of that grape. So nice, pleasant, just a little bit of better cup on this day. Day 21, this was back in line with more previous Janson experiences, especially when run through the V60. I wasn't having the same sort of success, as it was mostly floral with a slight bit of herbality, and it was that kind of Janson-like herbality, which was also present on day 9. So I was getting that kind of stripped away a little bit when brewed to the Chemex. And a lot of the reason I haven't been as big a fan of the Janson as I have of something like Esmeralda is mostly because Janson has had a little bit more of that herbal component to it, a little bit of a defining characteristic with that coffee. So it felt good, but overall it felt like maybe it was a little bit more stagnant. And honestly, by the end, I just kind of realized it was more the brew method as opposed to the actual coffee itself. Because on day 24, some adjustments yielded tremendous results, as I settled on the higher temperatures, I settled on the V60, and as a result, I settled on the Chemex, and as a result, so many of the sweeter aspects were present yet again in a more clear and abundant manner. So I found out that those things helped, definitely the temperatures at higher levels, definitely the Chemex, and definitely a bit of rest, because this cup right here was the best I had experienced. Wonderfully crisp. So many of the floral aspects in this cup on this day. Best day of the coffee to this point. Day 27, tried one more V60 today to see if maybe it had just been the rest that really did this coffee some justice, but it still didn't feel quite as floral vibrant on this day, as there was plenty of it present still, but not to the same level that I'd experienced in the Chemex, which just really heightened those aspects. Cup has taken a bit of the Janson herbality yet again, and there is a sweeter florality within the cup as well. Nice little candied sweetness and clarity again, but still not quite the same sort of structure that I'd experienced from the Chemex. Day 30, one last day through the Chemex, and yet again, it's back to its best, as the floral clarity remains super high. The Jasmine listed in here. Huge abundance, really enjoying the way it's coming out in this cup. Very pronounced, very defined, and it's skewing heavily on the sweeter floral side of things while maintaining a super clean base. And even at this time, I think that the other note that they have listed on here is a citric note. It's not as citric as it is on the floral side of things, which is a huge selling point to me on this coffee as well. If you're going really high on the florals and you're keeping them very sweet, then it's going to be a cup of coffee I very much enjoy. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we were getting. All right, 3 level 5, so let's go through those real quick. The cleanliness level 5, that one in no sense is surprising whatsoever. Even that no matter which Janson, with the exception of the carbonic maceration one that we have reviewed, has, I believe, reached a level 5. Maybe the original one didn't, but they're really clean cups of coffee, and that's one of the biggest selling points to me about these coffees, is very much my type of coffee to begin with. Florality level 5, most defining characteristic of this coffee, and it's done really well, and I really enjoy the way that it comes out in this coffee. It's much more on the sweeter side of things, and I keep harping on that word defined, but mostly because it's really well structured and really well defined in this cup. Citrus fruit level 5, that might be slightly high, especially as I'm drinking it on this day. On the earlier days, yes, very much that sort of candied lemon aspect to it, but I think maybe a lot of the adjustments I made kind of toned down the citrus, which at this point, I don't mind the citrus as much as maybe I had in the past, but I was honestly aiming to get more of the sweetness and the floral sweetness, most specifically from this cup. Even then, you could justify it at a level 5. There is a very sort of distinct citrus within this cup as well. So I'm fine with it there, even if on this day I might tone it down one. A couple of level 4s, finished level 4. It surprisingly has a little bit more of a finish than I think I would have expected. Given just how clean the base is for this cup of coffee, it does last a little longer than I would have anticipated, so I have no issue with that. The 4 is perfect for it, and if anything, given that it is such a nice cup of coffee to begin with, I appreciate the sweetness being a little bit more on the lasting side of things. Sweetness, level 4. Yes, this is actually on the sweeter side of the Janson coffees we've reviewed. That includes the carbonic maceration one, so that's a huge selling point on this coffee. I really like the sweetness level within it. Level 4 looks good. Maybe on the slightly higher side of level 4, but really nice sweetness overall. Acidity level 4, right there at that level 4 mark too. It's nothing that's kind of skewing in one direction or another, and that's going to be good given that the sweetness is in equal or higher measure to the acidity, so I'm fine with that. I think maybe the only thing really we'll touch on three other things real quick. The berry fruit, so they do have a grape list on here, and I kind of touched on that briefly, that I didn't necessarily get it. While I'm drinking this coffee today, knowing that there's a grape flavor note, I can kind of sense it, but at the same time, it's really pushing it because the other factors in this cup, that florality and citrus, definitely dominate it the most. So it's a little bit more subtle and in the background if it's even there for me, but yet again, nothing overly defined or pronounced on that end. Caramel level 2, I wanted to discuss that real quick because I think that goes along with what I expect from Manhattan, that slight kind of candied sweetness, because that was present in this cup as well, and it's something I assume comes from the actual roasting machine itself, and that gives Manhattan a very unique characteristic to the coffee. And then body level 1, just real quick, I mean, it is a Panamanian Geisha and it is run through the Chemex, so yeah, it would have been surprising if it had reached any level higher than that level 1 mark. But for the most part, talking myself through this tasting wheel, I really like the way that it looks. I think it's a great representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I said in the last Janson review that the carbonic maceration one was now my second favorite, but this one was actually better than that for me. So this one I would say is my second favorite. I still liked the 600 a little bit more, but that's because the 600 was a little bit more my type of coffee. But if I'm being completely honest, I feel like this one was actually better done. I feel like this is a better cup of coffee in general than that 600 was. So for those reasons, I would say that this is on the better end of the Janson coffees that I have had from Manhattan. It's kind of, we'll go with 1A and 1B. I appreciated this coffee more than the 600, but I think I just liked the 600 a little bit more because that one was a little bit more my flavor profile. But the characteristics about this one that really sold it was the fact that it was sweeter than a lot of the other ones. The floral aspect was more dominant and there was significantly less herbality. So I think they're going in the right direction with these Janson coffees. This one is another example of that. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, again, very much like me, if you like your Panamanian Geishas, and this one has some very great characteristics that if you're looking for will be present in huge abundance. That's of course going to be your clarity, your sweetness, and your florality. There are additional components to it. The citrus that comes in it is on the sweeter side of things, which is wonderful. And while it might not necessarily be the most complex Panamanian Geisha out there, I actually appreciated more of the structure and direction from this coffee than maybe some of the coffees where you can't necessarily distinguish just because they're a little bit more varied in terms of the overall depth to them. For the most part, I think I'll leave this review at that. If you've by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Janson X928 Wash Process Panama from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.